Are there any members of the public?
No,
The content of this meeting is being sent to a third party.
that's
What
just
is
YouTube.
YouTube? Okay. Um, so let's begin with the council referral. Drew, you're up.
Thank you. Guess I'll go ahead and share screen then, right?
Okay.
So thank you all. So the purpose of this presentation is to introduce the changes to the land use bylaw required through Bill 44 as the province takes measures to increase housing availability and affordability in BC. So this bill, which is referred to as the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act 2023, is intended to end single-family zoning in the province for communities of a certain size. It also introduces changes applicable to all communities. One change, which is required by June 30th, 2024, is that all local governments must amend their bylaws to allow either a secondary suite or a detached secondary suite on any residential zone lot. Currently on Bowen, most residential zones already have this permission. There is, however, a list of zones and subzones that don't allow secondary suites. These are the zones that must be amended to allow secondary suites by June 30th, 2024, as per the province's requirement. And I'll note, obviously looking at this list, it looks like most do require amendments, but in terms of it's a little different if we look at kind of the coverage across the municipality. So I mean, most of our areas are, or I guess I should say, most of the residential zones that cover the most areas are already fully in compliance with these changes. But it's just a couple of these, mainly the kind of the comprehensive development zones that'll have to be changed. So those are generally kind of the subdivision specific zones and some of the new subdivisions over past years. And just a note that the policies of our official community plan already support secondary suites in all areas across the island. Just to back up to this page, so I talked about kind of the first paragraph there. So a note on some of the other changes required for, again, all communities. One is that housing needs reports must identify 20 years of housing needs, that official community plans must be updated every 5 years and plan for 20 years of growth. And there will be a phasing out of public hearings for housing projects that are already consistent with the OCP. Just wanted to touch just briefly on, just got a kind of page here of all the changes that are not applicable currently to Bowen. But just to note that, so these are changes applicable to basically communities in urban containment boundaries. And if for communities not within urban containment boundary, these are applicable to those that are over 5,000 people. And just a caveat that, even though Bowen will be, it's reasonable that we'll hit that population maybe in not the next census period, but the one after. But just to note that there's still some further exemptions there, mainly that the changes, again, even in a population of 5,000 people, these changes are still just applicable to properties on water or sewer. So again, it'll still be just limited areas, even in the future, once we pass the population, just limited areas that this will apply to. But anyways, just to go over that briefly. So essentially it's opening up the number of units allowable on one lot. So typical single family zoning in Metro Vancouver will be a single family dwelling and a secondary suite. So, the first point there, 3 units. So it's going to be allowing 1 additional unit on properties less than 280 square meters, a 4th unit on properties larger than that. And then going onwards from there, we're looking at transit oriented areas and allowing even higher densities and doing away with parking requirements, setbacks, maximum heights, things like that. And all of it with the intent of just breaking up the cost of land between multiple units, which is, out here on the West Coast, it's the real driving factor of all of these high prices. And just one thing to touch on, and you guys might be well familiar with the whole missing middle concept, but I think it's really important to note and really important to address. Just the fact that, when looking at our housing stock in North America, that 70 to 80% of all residential zoned land is specifically zoned single family residential out of all the categories of housing out there. But if we look at the makeup of our, if we look at the makeup of households themselves, it's 85% of households have no children and 33% of households just being one person. So we can conclude that, the majority of the housing stock that's out there is oversized and overpriced for the kind of demographics that have been hit the hardest by the affordability crisis and who need housing the most. One kind of optional point to discuss. So this is not related to any of the provincial changes, nothing required of our municipality, but it'd be prudent to address at this time. The maximum size of secondary suites. So keep in mind, this is a secondary suite, so a suite attached to the principal residence, not a detached secondary suite. But the Bowen Islands land use bylaw currently restricts that floor area of the suite to 90 square meters. That was originally passed to mirror the BC building code, but interestingly, the BC building code has since removed that restriction. So at this point, it's only our local restriction under the Bowen's land use bylaw that restricts that ensures that. So yeah, if we're talking about offering more flexibility around secondary housing, we might wish to raise that floor area maximum or just to remove it completely. So if that change is desirable, so that maximum size can then be amended alongside all these other changes required through Bill 44. So yeah, I'd love to hear any discussion points the committee has on the changes required to allow secondary suites, and as well, if you have any opinions on the size of suites.
Okay, firstly, does anyone have any questions or comments for Drew?
I have some questions.
Okay, Brenda?
Yeah, so I wanted to clarify a couple of things. First of all, and this may be an obvious point, and I apologize if it is, but is Bowen in an urban containment boundary or currently?
No, we're not.
All right, so we're not in an urban containment boundary, and we do not have 5,000 people. I think we know that. Do you know what our current population is?
We're around what, 4,200? I think that was the last census.
Okay. I think I also heard you say in relation to the points on the first page of the presentation, or at least the memo briefing note that we received, that those allowable units, if a municipality does opt in, or if this applies to them without opting in, that the 3 units, for example, being permitted on single family or duplex lots less than 280 square meters, that's only permitted if that property is on water and sewer. Is that what you said?
Right. I think the exact legislation, I think it was water or sewer. That's a small distinction, but I believe that's what it was.
So I'm trying to understand that. So on water or sewer. So basically, it apply any house that's existing is presumably going to be on a water system of some kind.
So it's on municipal water
Yeah.
and sewer.
Okay. So on municipal water, and what percentage of properties on Bowen are on a municipal water system?
Sorry, I don't even have Daniel, do you have any thoughts of the number there?
I would estimate half, but
I was
probably
just going to say I
think
had
it's
heard
half.
half, yeah.
Mm.
Actually, I'd heard
Okay.
the other, that half are on private wells.
All right.
Yeah, Michael's on the water committee too.
Great. Okay, so half of the properties are on municipal water. Okay, and I guess the other, and so just going back down then, so 280 square meters, are my calculations correct that is about 0.14, 0.15 of an acre?
I just know that it's 2,800 square feet.
280 square meters. I got about 0.07 acres.
Yeah, it's quite small.
Okay.
Less than a tenth of an acre. So
Wow.
Okay, thank you. My math has never been my strong point, so I appreciate the help. All right, so then knowing that the average lot size on Bowen is more than that, we'd be looking at then the 4 units per lot number, I think, by default, would we not?
That looks like it. Yeah, that would kick in on most properties. Yeah, most would not be smaller than that.
Okay. And then I guess my other question is, there's this other 6-unit standard that talks about being close to transit stops with frequent service. Have they given any guidance on what they define as being, close to a transit stop and what frequent service means?
They have defined it by regulation, and there's no areas on Bowen. Like none of the Bowen routes are.
Frequent service.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank
Don't
you.
we
That's
know it?
very
Yeah.
helpful to know. Okay, I'm probably going to have a few more questions, but that's it for sort of the first ones that were kind of springing to mind. I'll let
Okay.
someone else have a
Yeah,
turn.
you elicited some interesting information there.
Yeah.
Someone else? Betty.
I had a question about the exemption D and E. I just don't understand it. Land within a zone, minimum lot size created 4,050 meters square. What does that all mean?
Sorry, where are you?
We're in the exemptions,
Hmm.
D and E,
Do you want me to share something?
1D and E.
Right, so in Bill 44, the exemptions to the small scale multi-unit
Yeah.
housing has exemptions. So land within a zone which has a minimum lot size of 4,000 square meters. So 4,050, I wonder if that's 4 hectares. In which case, like if you were in a zone, so our rural residential 1 zone has a minimum lot size of 4 hectares. So I guess this would be saying then that would be exempt. If it happened to be on municipal water, it would nevertheless be exempt, as would a parcel of land that's larger than 4 hectares.
So our rural residential lots would be exempt.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And sorry, Drew, like just as I read the exemption too, I do think, and I've told council, like my reading of it is that you're exempt unless you're connected to water and sewer, because it does not apply unless to any following land that's not connected to a water or sewer system. So I previously read that like if we became over 5,000, then it would apply almost exclusively currently to like Kate's Hill and maybe
Yeah.
Bowen Island Trunk Road. And then I know I've talked to the province as well, or Drew and I have, just in terms of currently in the bill, there's a potential to seek an extension of these provisions, in particular about infrastructure needs. And so we would be, like if we were over 5,000 and this did apply to us, we would have been in a position to be seeking an extension because of our issues with the Snug Cove sewer capacity. And so I've talked to the province too about, but what happens if in the next census or the one after that, the census occurs and then however many months later they come out and they say, you're now 5,000. It's like, what's then the province's expectation in terms of timelines? And they said, well, it's not in the bill now, but they're hoping that then it would be in the bill before the next census comes out, because we would be in the same position of saying, potentially we need an extension to add capacity to the sewer system before we could be implementing it.
So that's a very important point. I just wanted to, you said, because I asked the specific question before. So your interpretation or your reading of the bill is that there's 2 requirements that you have to be connected to the municipal water system and to a sewer system.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those conditions need to be met. Is that correct?
That is, and I think it's something that we would probably be seeking clarity on. But so essentially the exemption right now reads, right, the section 4 and 5, which are about the small scale housing, does not apply in relation to any of the following land. And then C is land that is not connected to a water or sewer system.
Okay.
Provided as a service by the city or by Metro Vancouver. So it would exempt as well, like Cowan Point Utility, like lands at Seymour Bay are on a water and a sewer system, but it's not provided by the city.
Okay. Richard. Yes, Richard.
Well,
you
just
hear me?
following up on that point, and I think Brenda, you were just touching on it. Just because a property is connected to sewer and or water doesn't necessarily mean that the sewer system has capacity to take on the additional, residents or in-suite, whatever it is. How is that addressed, or how does the municipality address that?
I mean, that's why the bill, as it's written, has ability to seek extensions. So there's a provision that's like if you're saying we can't service it, you would be seeking an extension from the province.
For a defined, so
A
I'm a
defined
property owner.
period. Yeah.
A defined period. So I'm a property owner. I'm wanting to develop my property, but the sewer capacity is not there. So the municipality must then increase the capacity of the sewer system.
Mhm.
And this has been a concern of a lot of municipalities. Not only do they have to get it done, but somebody has to pay for it.
Mhm.
And but at the moment, is it fair to say though that there's not, how could I put it, not significant impact on Bowen because we're under the 5,000 people threshold?
Yeah, so in terms of the change that needs to happen by June, which is like our current focus, for Bowen, it's not a large impact in that it's the secondary suite piece that Drew presented. And as we say, like the majority of residential zones on Bowen and of residential properties on Bowen already permit secondary suites.
Okay.
What
So that
So I think Brenda beat out Betty just by a second. Go ahead, Brenda.
the real quick question? What are the specific neighborhoods that aren't in compliance? Those ones that were in red on the map? Can we actually just say which neighborhoods those are?
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
Hood Point
I
is
can-
one.
Hear that again.
Of course.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the CD zones, which area they pertain to off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, just a few examples, like I think
If you could bring that map up, I think the members of the
I'm
committee
trying, yeah,
could
it's slowed down.
identify them for Brenda. But I saw, yeah, so Hood Point,
Kate's Hill.
Kate's Hill. I think that's part of Evergreen on the west side there, I think.
Right.
And
so
then
it's
at the bottom,
yeah, it's like it's the Arbutus Ridge, like the new subdivision
The new
of
development?
Joan Audrey
Okay,
Lane
so
doesn't
Arbutus
permit
Ridge.
secondary suites.
and
It's
then
a portion, like sorry, the red at the bottom is this Cowan, like Seymour Bay area.
Yeah.
And Drew's highlighted the CD zone, and it's like one of the sub areas within the zone doesn't permit secondary suites.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, that's why that TUP application's pending for the Arbutus Ridge property.
yeah, and then similarly, like it's the Kate's Hill area is shown there, but again, it's like a few of the sub areas don't permit.
I see.
So
So I
the map,
generally-
shows large areas, but some of them it's like, well, it's actually a smaller subset that don't permit secondary suites.
Okay, I understand. So,
Yeah.
but you've identified the whole neighborhood because a subset of it
Yeah.
is non-compliant.
Mm.
Okay, so we're looking at Kate's Hill, Hood Point, Seymour Bay, and Arbutus Ridge, did you say? That's
Yeah, and
one on the south?
but that's
West.
on the west side.
Okay, so what's sorry, this one on the south?
Is Seymour Bay.
Oh, of course, thank you.
And just to be clear, Kate's Hill, like the majority of areas on Kate's Hill permit secondary suites. So like everything up Village Drive is permitted secondary suites.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Betty, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I had a question about, so if you're in a zoning, one of these comprehensive development zones that allows the suites, but are there stratas within those zones that do not allow them? And is that okay?
There are stratas, like I know of some that, their bylaws don't permit, either bylaws don't permit secondary suites or
Yeah.
like covenants don't permit secondary suites. And the province has said that their regulation doesn't override that. that
Oh,
they can
okay.
continue to regulate on their own.
Oh,
So like we currently have zones that the zone permits secondary suites and the strata does not. And
Yeah.
in this case, we may have more of that circumstance.
isn't that interesting? The province is willing to override municipal bylaws, but not
Yeah.
since. Anyway, I was going to ask that question myself.
And like we have cases where we've permitted subdivisions and covenanted not for secondary suites. So it might be like there's a subdivision where their like septic report said, well, there's enough septic for 3 units, say. And so we would covenant, and they want 3 lots. And so we would covenant and say, okay, you can only have the 3 units. You can't have more. You can't have secondary suites then, because that's how you've chosen to handle the servicing constraints. And that would continue to apply.
Kirsty, we haven't heard from you.
I don't have anything particularly to add.
Okay, that's why we haven't heard from you.
Amazing, eh?
Brenda again.
Yeah, it seems to me that when rezoning applications come to the municipality, that's an opportunity where the municipality can request a community amenity in exchange for that rezoning being granted. And am I correct that this legislation effectively removes that bargaining chip?
Yes, I mean, I think that's the intent of a lot of some of the provincial change. They did bring in, at the same time, they brought financing tools and something called an amenity ACC, amenity cost charge, ACC. So the ability to, like a development cost charge, where a municipality can pass a bylaw and actually charge developments defined amounts for defined benefits. And then I noticed just yesterday, hot off the press, the province introduced new legislation that has further housing changes, and some of that is quite like essentially a program for zoning for housing, essentially an inclusionary zoning bylaw. So you could zone and say you need to provide a certain amount of affordable housing units within a development, and you'd be doing that by zoning bylaw. And then there's quite lengthy, in my skimming, analysis that has to take place beforehand, where you can demonstrate that it's like your requirements are financially viable. But yes, in essence, the whole sort of drive of some of these changes is that it's intended to drive the planning more to the OCP level, where your OCP level is meant to define where the housing takes place, and then you're meant to then amend your zoning afterwards immediately to have it set in stone. So the assumption is that you have done more extensive planning at the OCP level, and then not having individual rezonings for properties to match the OCP.
That OCP amendment requirement every 5 years. I mean, that in some ways that could be the most onerous thing. Now, we have to be careful here, because whatever our comments can't really be about the legislation, but have to be about the Bowen response to it. So I'm wondering at this point, firstly, I don't think it's up to us to delve into the particular amendments required to the bylaws. I trust the staff to do that right. But do we otherwise have recommendations? One that seems to come up a couple of times has to do with the water and sewer situation. I think we might recommend that council ask staff or approach provincial government themselves for clarity on those issues. And there's several issues there. Can someone help me?
Well, carrying capacity,
Yeah.
is there enough water to supply? And does the sewer system have the capacity for the development that's being proposed?
Yeah, so it's capacity for the liquids, but I think also capacity for the money. I mean, Bowen right now is, my goodness, we're spending a lot of money on these things, just trying to get them up to standard, let alone. Brenda.
Yeah, and I just wondered as well about maybe, in terms of considering whether or not to opt in, whether we can, I don't know what the appropriate wording is here, but just that the recent comments that were made by Vancouver Coastal Health about our water systems when they appeared before council should be kept in mind as as council considers whether or not to opt in.
Okay, well, why
Sorry,
don't we add
Brenda,
that?
sorry.
Yeah.
There's not a provision in the bill necessarily to opt in to the other
Yeah, no,
provisions, like the small scale stuff. It's like if we were over 5,000, it would apply to us. And if we're smaller, it doesn't. I mean, the province would probably say, well, you could independently decide to amend your zoning bylaw to match.
yeah,
Okay.
But
I
that's
think
not like
that-
an open question for, like, council's not
Yeah.
considering that.
and
Okay.
I
We're sort
think
of
it-
Thank you
flagging
for
it as
providing-
knowing, yeah. Like if we
thanks.
become over 5,000,
These
then
are the issues that we'll be facing.
so we want to know about it and be prepared.
Right.
But right now we have to comply with the secondary suites, and
Yeah.
we don't have to comply with the other piece.
Yeah,
Like
So,
the
the
rest
other,
of it,
the
I
small
think
scale.
would require a much longer discussion than we have time
Yeah.
Yeah.
for.
Then I won't ask the question.
I
Yeah,
mean, it
Christy.
may make sense as we approach the 5,000. I mean, just in general, municipal council is going to have to consider a whole raft of issues that they've never considered before. I know policing is different, for example, after you have
Yeah.
5,000 people and so on. So maybe that could be our recommendation. I wouldn't mind if some consideration were given to the consequences of Bowen's population reaching 5,000. Early consideration. There may be some things we can do now that should be done now. And Betty has her hand up.
Yeah, sorry, it's not part of that recommendation. Does this 20-year housing plan apply to us?
Yes.
And are they providing money to do that?
Yes, they provided every municipality capacity funding. So Bowen received around 168,000 in capacity funding to implement the provincial legislation changes. So we will
And
use some
have
of
they-
that to do the housing needs report,
Right.
and we're going to put as much of that as we can towards our OCP work. So sort of, yeah.
And are there guidelines for what, I mean, is it just census data or is it things like water capacity and sewer and all that?
They have promised guidelines in early 2024, and they've promised that since
Okay.
December. So, we're less early in 2024 than when they first promised it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Kirsty.
Yeah, just a question, if we only have to comply with the secondary suites, is council taking the position that as we're under 5,000 and we really don't want people anyway on Bowen, or many people don't, that we're not going to look at doing any changes and ahead of time, like, where sewer and water are a huge issue in the Cove.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we should
Septic
recommend-
and water may not be a big issue in other places.
We
And
recommend council develop a plan for keeping the population under 5,000.
well,
So-
that seems to be the focus.
I
But
know. Anyway,
I think, Kirsty, I would say that, we have to do this change. Like the secondary suites is due by June.
Yeah.
The housing needs report is due by December, but we would look to do it earlier because we know it would drive some of the OCP conversation. And I think for other bigger housing pieces, council said would want the focus, like the conversation for that to be as part of the OCP review process.
okay, Steph, have you managed to draft anything that looks like a recommendation?
No.
And then,
Um,
sorry, Michael, I do know too, the
yeah.
one thing that we were looking for the APC input on too is just the idea of secondary suite size.
Yeah.
Just in
Oh,
that we
right,
currently
right.
cap it at 90 square meters
Yeah.
and have since we first allowed secondary suites. And knowing that, well, the BC building code rationale for that restriction is no longer there. And we allow detached secondary suites to be larger. So they can be up to, and Drew, I think they can be up to 140 square meters on a lot that's 2 acres in size.
Okay.
And so the discussion we've been having is like, does the attached secondary suite size to be in a flat 90 square meters, does that
Yeah.
still make sense?
Well, if the rationale for imposing that limit is gone,
Yeah.
it does seem
And-
to me if the motivation of all of this is increasing housing, increasing the sizing of the housing available, gives many more options for who, families could move into it. That sort of thing. I don't, anyone else have any comments? I don't mean to prejudge this issue.
Well,
I-
90 square meters is what, approximately 1,000 square feet?
Yeah.
That's a pretty reasonable size for, you can fit 3 bedroom. If you go into a condo downtown in Vancouver, you'll get a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,000 square foot condos. So I think it's a fair size. Should
But
allow.
yeah, it's a fair size, but is there any reason to restrict it? Like, what's the benefit of restricting it to 1,000 square feet?
I guess I don't know. The larger it is, the more people presumably can live there.
And there are going to be limits anyway, based on the lot
Yeah.
size, setbacks.
Yeah. So I think the
again,
90
water
should go
capacity
away.
and septic or sewer capacity. Brenda,
Well, I mean, there must have been a rationale for restricting detached to 140 square meters. Daniel, do you know what that rationale was? Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I know when we did the first round, I think it was 120 square meters. And I think our initial discussion, it was to keep it the same as attached, so 90, and it sort of was increased by council through the process, I think with the desire to provide, additional space so that the detached secondary suites could be family-sized housing. Yeah, there's definitely discussion and preference of having it like a clear, larger dwelling and smaller dwelling on the property, that one is clearly accessory to the other, which doesn't always, I mean, it is the case, but isn't. Like, there's many places on Bowen where the principal residence is smaller than that 140 square meters, and sometimes they'll build the detached, right, that's equally small, in which case they're just 2 smaller dwellings on the property. Yeah, and then I know, like, the secondary suite one was 90, partly because it was sort of building code provisions, and partly, yeah, it was sort of the desire that it be a, like a basement suite, a smaller level within the dwelling. So when we're sort of considering, okay, well, if it doesn't have to be because of building code, what are the bigger implications? And, is it a concern essentially of, well, like on the 10-acre lot on Bowen right now, you could build 20,000 square feet quite easily.
Yeah.
It seems a little funny to say, well, you could build a 20,000 square foot mansion and a 1,000 square foot suite within it, and that's the biggest it can be. But then you say, well, if we don't have any restriction, people could essentially build, like 2 large houses attached by a common entranceway.
yeah, although I'm
But
attracted
then,
by the consistency of the 140 square meter limit.
yeah.
Yeah. I just, one follow-up question, if I may. Is part of the reason why this issue is being brought forward is because homeowners have complained about only being able to build 1,000 square foot approximately attached secondary suite?
More the issues we've encountered with it is that, so we legalized secondary suites on Bowen in 2008. But like most places, the rate of secondary suites in a community often is not determined by whether they're legal or not. So, the rate of secondary suites in houses on Bowen is probably fairly similar to what it was in 2005. And what we found is that primarily through like business licensing of suites for use as RGA use or bed and breakfast use, there are many suites on Bowen that exceed 90 square meters that then are not able to get building permits, are not able to become legalized suites within the dwelling without substantial changes. So that's more where we've encountered it. And I think probably because up till 2019 or 2018, when the code changed, like that was consistent across every municipality, was people knew, well, I can build a 90 square meter secondary suite within my dwelling. Whereas now it sort of changes a bit. So now some municipalities allow larger suites, and so it's more a thing that people are aware of. And then in some cases, it ends up being strange. So on small lots on Bowen right now, you can build it bigger if it's attached to the house. And if it's detached, it ends up being smaller because it's tied to lot size. And then once you pass a lot of a
Right.
certain size, then you can build it bigger if it's detached than if it's attached. And so you end up with funny circumstance. Depending on the lot size, it's better for people to build it as part of the house or as separate from the house,
Okay.
which maybe wasn't the intention, I think.
No. Betty.
I guess to me, size has to do with what the municipality's purpose is. If the idea is to increase affordable housing, that would be a different answer than just increasing general housing stock. And basically, I know that at the government level, that the opposition to this bill was basically that it monetizes housing again, that, you know, people's property will be worth a lot more if they can have multiple units on it. So I think in a way, the size of the suite is related to that. And I think you allude to that when you say they got used for oysters.
Okay. Yeah, this is always the paradox. Is affordable housing gives rise to
Yeah.
density, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, at this point, Drew and Daniel, I'm struggling a little bit about what the commission can do here.
I'll share my not very helpful screen. If I missed something, like if you guys made points that you feel could be in a recommendation.
Okay, well, that's one of them. The advisor recommend early consideration.
To the implications of the population
well-
becoming over 5,000?
Sure. Because it's going to be. I mean, in preparation, yeah, in advance of reaching that, yeah, well in advance of reaching that number, I guess.
Mm,
Because I think we
Which
could
word you
easily
want?
get caught very flat-footed here.
mm.
Could we add implications to the legislative requirements of the population becoming over 5,000?
Well, I think it's more than that, though. Aren't we also concerned about, well, yeah, I guess that does encompass a lot, but it has implications for Bill 44. It has implications also for our having to pay for our police service. Those are two things I'm aware of. There may
and
very
then
well
there's a whole
be
bunch of
others.
other things that we're already complaining about, like ferry
Mm.
service and so on.
Yeah.
But I think for our purposes, well, let's restrict it to Bill 44 for given our mandate as a commission.
Right. Okay.
So to the legislative requirements in Bill 44, when the population of Bowen Island, yeah, approaches, yeah, not very. Bill 44.
Maybe level?
Well, I just say in anticipation of the population of Bowen Island reaching 5,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in anticipation of the population of Bowen Island reaching 5,000.
Feels like we're growing into a teenager or something. What are we gonna do when they hit puberty?
Exactly.
Well, it's we have growing pains already, right? So that
Mhm.
fits. What I'd like to do though is I'd like to put the specific comments on the referral first.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I think our first comment is that, and I don't know how to say this diplomatically, but we trust the staff to do the right amendments. I mean, you know, how can you not support the amendments if they're required?
Yeah,
Support staff,
so we don't need to see it again, basically, is what we're saying.
No,
Um,
last thing
I
I
don't
want to do
want,
is
you know, I don't think we
draft
need to.
bylaws.
Yeah.
The Advisory Planning Commission, um,
navigation of the legislative.
Navigating the needed changes.
needed bylaw change, needed.
Or the
bylaw
required?
amendments,
Yeah,
The required bylaw amendments.
yeah.
Without further referral to this commission.
Yeah.
It's like, don't bug us again.
What,
And then I'd like to get something about the water and sewer. I'd like to get it front of mind for council, maybe it is already, as a separate recommendation that,
No.
and
Like a new one or just
Yeah.
a,
council,
Okay.
a second recommendation, yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Council consider directing staff. Oh, are you ready for my second?
Oh, sorry.
Consider directing staff to continue analysis of the water and sewer capacity on the island and the financial implications of reaching an appropriate level, reaching an appropriate service level. Service, sorry,
Yeah,
that's my
I know.
Australianism coming out. Are people okay with that?
Is that specifically related to the 20-year
5,000.
plan?
Well, it's both. I think at the moment, you know, if firstly, we're permitting all these new secondary suites. I suspect there will not be big take up initially anyway. Brenda.
yeah, what about, I mean, there's, again, this was brought forth in my questions. There's two conditions for the application of Bill 44. And one is, that, the community be within an urban containment boundary. So, it would be great, if we could get, you know, confirmation of whether we are in fact in an urban containment boundary.
Yeah, you had a
Sorry,
comment.
Daniel
Brenda,
answered that question.
we're not within an urban containment boundary. That's the
know we're
regional
not?
growth strategy. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're outside of the regional growth strategy for Metro.
Can I ask, I might be a bit confused here, but there was an issue, the Islands Trust lands are exempt from Bill 44, is that right?
They are exempt from some of the requirements in Bill 44.
Okay. But municipalities are not.
Correct. Yeah,
And
there's
so-
some, like, so the local trust areas are specifically exempt from the secondary suite provision,
Okay,
but municipalities have to do it. And the islands trust areas have to do the housing needs report, but don't have to update their OCP and
Okay.
zoning bylaws to match.
so, and all those municipalities in the Islands Trust area, I think there's one.
Mhm.
Are we, is there some confusion that's going to arise over all this, or?
We have had, like, Drew and I have had like multiple meetings with the province and with the Islands Trust about sort of the various nesting requirements and which applies to which area. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds, but we'll let the politicians deal with that
Mm.
then. But I'll make my comment again. Bowen must be unique in being subject to 5 levels of government. I don't think most places are,
Mm.
you know, federal, provincial, municipal, or county. But then we have two others. Anyway, and it's, what can I say? It's causing endless entertainment for a lot of Facebook people.
Mm.
Okay. Does anyone have any further comments before I ask that to be a motion? Yeah, Brenda.
Yeah, I just have a question, and that's with respect to the third recommendation. On Are there, again, maybe I'm missing something and I apologize if I am, but are there implications of Bowen Island reaching 5,000 people with respect to Bill 44, given that we're not in an urban containment, within an urban containment boundary?
Yes, sorry. So the urban containment boundary means if you are smaller than 5,000, but within an urban containment boundary, it would apply to you.
But if you're over 5,000, it applies to you no matter what, right?
Yes. So if you are like Kitimat, where I was before here, it's over 5,000. So it applies to them, even though their regional district doesn't have an urban containment boundary. Or if you were,
Gotcha. Thank
I'm
you.
trying to think, I don't know offhand, but like Anmore or Belcarre, I don't know if they are or not. But in theory, if they were smaller, if you're a small municipality within a built up area, they're like, it still applies to you. You don't get to be, or it's like Lanceville, which is next to Nanaimo. You don't get to say, oh, we're a little community, because they say, no, you're part of the metro area.
You're
So it
really
applies
part
to
of
you.
Nanaimo, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that clarity.
And then we have the size of secondary suites. What do people think? I hear different opinions. I personally am in favor of increasing it to the 1,400 to match the detached.
I am too.
That's two.
I just think that there should be some thought about the purpose, having just gone through this whole routine about the short-term rentals. You know, the size of secondary suites should be related to the purpose for having them.
Okay, that would be, so Daniel, do you need recommendations on that issue today, or can we ask that it be brought back to us? Or that we could just,
I guess I would say it would almost be nice if you had initial recommendations that we could bring back to council, and then it could come back to.
Well, why
and then
don't we,
would
then our
become back.
recommendation is that we are amenable to an increase in the secondary suite size dependent upon establishing appropriate rationale for such increase. I think that's where the
What was the
commission
word
is
you
at.
used?
Unless, I don't know, Richard, maybe you can be the deciding vote here.
Well, can't we assume that the intention is for the municipality to increase the housing stock, in that they have recently opted out of short-term rental and secondary suites? We want that housing stock to be used for housing people that, live and maybe work on Bowen, not for tourism. So if that is the case, then larger suites, I think, would be preferable, in that, a family can live there. If we look at the graphic that up on the screen earlier, that was a tiny, how many square feet would that be, Daniel or Drew? That graphic that you had up of the block-off suite earlier in the presentation, how many square feet would that have been approximately?
Wouldn't it have been 1,000 square feet? I thought that's what we currently allow.
Oh, I think it would be, it looked far smaller than 1,000 square feet to me. In that, really, it's a bed, a very small,
Whether that's to scale, I'm just going to do a conversion here. What's 90 square meters in
Just
feet?
multiplied by 10.
In square feet, I got to.
So if that's 1,000 square feet, just to put it in perspective,
It's not.
that's a very poor use of 1,000 square feet.
I live in a 1,000 square foot house. I have a large living room, a dining room, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen, and a foyer.
Thank you. That's my point. So,
Okay. Can we go back to the recommendations and see if we can craft something that helps council here?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm taking notes in front of you guys. Now you can see my note-taking style.
Yeah.
1,000, okay.
Well, it's okay for me personally as
Yeah.
a primary residence.
But yeah, 1,000 square feet for one person is quite generous. 1,000 square feet for a family of 5 isn't very
Right.
generous.
That's
No.
my feeling is that we want to build
Yeah.
houses for families.
Yep.
So more
So-
like 15?
Yeah, Kirsty,
Well,
I don't disagree with your comment. I think it would be a little crowded if I lived with anybody else.
Okay, but 1,400 is the detached right now, right, Daniel?
But just make them the same.
It's 140 square meters, which is
Okay,
more
sorry,
like
140 square
yeah,
meters, yeah.
it's almost
1,500.
1,500 or maybe slightly over 1,500
Okay.
square feet.
So why don't we recommend that the bylaw be amended for such that maximum secondary suite size is 140 square meters for all secondary suites. That would be detached and otherwise.
Well, that would accommodate the scenario that you referred to earlier, Daniel, and that there are many secondary suites on Bowen already that are larger than 90 square meters or 1,000 square feet.
I'd love to. I don't think we have the statistics, but I suspect a lot of them are, if you like, family compounds. I know a few examples where another house has been built, and either mom and dad move into it or the kids move into it.
Mhm.
But I suppose that takes pressure off other housing on the island, so that or allows people to stay on the island who might not otherwise. Recommend that the land use by amendment require the secondary suite size to allow
Yeah, not require.
secondary suite size to be a maximum of 140 square meters for all secondary suites.
Consistent with, yeah, other.
Sorry, I missed the number again. Can you say the number?
140 square meters.
For both detached.
Like consistent
and-
with the detached? Oh,
Well, yeah, you say both for attached and detached. Second for all, or just say for all secondary suites. That covers it.
I think it's nice to clarify.
Okay, a little bit more clarity.
Yes, I like that.
What's a synonym for secondary suite?
Both detached and attached suites or units, okay.
Well, yeah, okay, good. And then you can delete the rest of that page. Okay. I mean, the one piece of information we don't have that I would love to have is how much take up there's going to be on all this.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense, Daniel, are there people in the wings waiting to build, or?
I think periodically I've reported to council on secondary suites. And it's not very fast, but it is a certain percent of essentially dwellings will have suites in them. And it's always, every time we do the stats, it's always super challenging because like which ones are new versus which are like retroactive permits to permit, unpermitted suites.
Because I'm hearing construction costs of 500-600 per square foot. So
yeah, there's not a strong financial incentive to build a 1,500 square foot secondary residence and spend $750,000 on it.
No, I think like the case is much more like, yeah, if Michael said family compound or like family planning, it's like that's more the type of scenario we see where it's like so that 2 households from the same extended family can live on the same property.
And we do hear concerns that as families grow, they have to leave behind. Okay, I think we're ready for a motion. Somebody.
Do you want to start at the top?
To move those recommendations.
Well, do you want to do them one at a time? You want to do them all at once?
Well, why don't we try them all at once, and if it fails, we'll do them one at a time.
Okay. Is everyone clear on what they're putting their name behind, I guess, is what I'm really sure of.
I'll
I'm
move
just
all those
looking,
things.
Sorry, Betty?
I said I will move it as Steph wrote it.
On block, okay. Second?
Oh, hold on, Brenda had,
I just had a question about the second recommendation. Of the financial implications of reaching an appropriate service level. What do we mean with our existing population?
No,
Or is
well,
that,
Well, that's probably a first step, but a service level, with regard to the increased housing, that's really what we're talking about here.
appropriate service level
To enable
to
to,
Enable
meet the
the
demand.
secondary suites.
It will
additional
increase
secondary
housing
suites.
stock.
Yeah, just increased housing is good. I don't know, for me.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Actually, I take that back. This is all about secondary suites, right?
Yeah,
So enable the increased number of secondary suites. Why don't we say that? Okay,
yeah.
that's good clarification there, Brenda. Yeah.
An increased number of secondary. If you want to say like, because these are supposed to be standalone, so pretend it's separate from the meeting. So pursuant
Anyway.
to Bill 444.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or the intentions of,
Yeah.
or
Then you just have to tidy up the beginning
To-
of that line there.
yeah, to enable any increase in the number of secondary suites.
oh, sorry. Okay, right.
Maybe required by Bill 44.
Actually, permitted is really the right word because
Okay,
nobody's
thank you.
forcing anybody to build a
Very
secondary
true,
suite.
very true. Permitted by, yeah, that's better.
Okay. I
Michael's
think
consider
we,
parking. And you want this consider, Michael?
sorry?
The consider. Okay. Fine.
Well, I don't, actually, you were the one, Steph, who taught me to use the word consider because we can't tell council what to do.
Yeah, because
We
the
can
word
ask them to think
recommend
about
is
it.
the word that's the key. Taking away the
Oh,
boss
okay.
advance piece, but it's up to you. It's okay.
They'll do it all they want.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think Daniel's gonna make them do it anyway. So, if not the 7 water boards that are apparently gonna fold. Anyway. So Betty, as the mover, are you still
Yeah.
okay with the amended motion?
Yep, that's
And
better.
Brenda, will you second it in exchange
Yes,
for the
I
change you
will
got?
second it. Yep.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I think that, how can I put it? I think that does communicate the meeting, but I think it also will be of some assistance to council, which is okay. So, Andrew, did you enjoy that?
Yeah, it was great.
We,
Lots of discussion.
we do always stick the landing, although when we're up in the air, it gets a little shaky sometimes. Okay, if I can move along to the agenda, which I've lost. Oh, here it is. We have another referral, and this has to do with rezoning of 1034 Miller Road. Is this yours also, Drew?
That's right. Yeah.
Ah, okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys. So Bowen Island Municipality has received a request to amend the land use bylaw to add the general services use to the list of principal permitted uses in the village civic zone. This application was introduced to council at their regular meeting on February 26, 2024, and was referred to the Advisory Planning Commission for discussion. The application was submitted by Christine Smith of Jersey Investments Incorporated, who is the owner of the property at 1034 Miller. For years, the property has been used by multiple groups, including an ambulance station with EMT offices, an insurance office, and an accessory dwelling unit. After the owner moved out of the dwelling unit, The insurance office was no longer permitted under the zoning, considering that general services was not a permitted use in the zone, and it also couldn't be permitted as a home business any longer without the owner residing at the property. So the owner applied for it to be permitted under a temporary use permit, which was approved by council on November 9th, 2020 for a 3-year term. Once that was coming to its end in November 2023, the applicant reapplied and the temporary use permit was extended for another 3 years from November 27, 2023. But just a note that under section 497(2) of the Local Government Act, a temporary use permit can only be reissued once. So hence the applicant, followed that up with a rezoning application to make the change permanent, and that she would no longer need to continue applying for temporary use permits. So on this page, just got the existing zoning and allowable uses on the left there, and then the new use to be added on the right. Sorry, this is really dumb of me. Now that I'm sharing the screen, I got my, see if I can move. Okay, good, I can move that. Sorry, I just had something in the way of being able to read that. Okay, so just to read out the general services definition and just the first 2 points that apply to this particular use. So it's services to individuals or other businesses, including and not limited to bank and financial institutions, post offices, instructional service, film processing, photocopying service, rentals, barbershop, or beauty salons. Point B, that it's activities of an accounting, administrative, clerical, consulting, professional, or record-keeping nature conducted for monetary gain or for benefit of the public. And so again, this was an insurance office. So in reviewing the proposed amendment to the land use bylaw, some councillors expressed concern that the amendment would allow general services use on all village civic zone properties. So that would, so you can see everything blue on the map here essentially. So this would affect the subject property on the far left, and then the fire hall, the new fire hall, the RCMP office, the museum and archives, and the library. Concern was expressed as to the wide range of businesses that could appear at those locations if their current use were to end. And so there are several alternatives that to go about allowing general services on the 1034 Miller Road property. So the first option is discussed, I guess that's in the middle there, the applicant's choice, was that the land use bylaw itself just be amended to allow general services use on all village civic properties. Alternatively, first option listed there, that the 1034 Miller Road property could be rezoned to an alternate or new zoning, which allows general services as well as all the existing. We'd have to find one, or make one that allows all the existing uses currently operating on the property. Third option on the far right there would be a zone variation, and that would allow the general services use only at 1034 Miller Road, or it would add that. It would add that use to the existing allowances, but again, it would add that only for 1034 Miller Road. That's so yeah, that third option is noteworthy. That would, that satisfies the applicant's request. It also addresses the concern from council. Anyways, we'll turn things over to the APC discussion regarding the rezoning request and the options for the amendment.
Okay. Questions or comments? Questions for Drew in particular?
Drew, I'm not sure I fully understand what council's concern is regarding having all properties zoned in the same way.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, I'm not sure there was any specific concerns, just other than kind of just, I guess the unknown. I guess it was just, and yeah, I mean, none of those are all pretty long-standing uses on all those properties, so nothing's expected to turn over quickly. But yeah, just I guess there are prominent locations, and it was just a concern of.
I think the municipality
could become.
Actually owns 2 of the properties.
What's that, Michael?
I think the municipality actually owns 2 of the properties, the library and the museum land.
Mm-hmm.
So
it seems to me like it's a great place for general services, and it's surrounded by other commercial stuff, where I consider the fire hall and the medical commercial. So I'm not sure why it would be a problem.
Brenda.
Yeah, I find myself agreeing with Kirsty's comment on that. I agree that does seem to be an appropriate spot for general services. But if council has a concern about it, and both the applicant's wishes and council's wishes could be accommodated through a zone variation, you know, maybe that makes more sense.
Is the principle that you only make as much legislative change as the circumstances require?
Well, I think
Is that what
I
council's? where
I'm trying to
council's coming from?
trying to guess why
Pity
council.
Alex is not here.
Yeah, I'm trying to guess why council wouldn't have wanted to have sort of a wholesale like that all of the VCI zoning be, or VC1, I'm not sure if that's a Roman numeral, be amended to add general services must be because they want to consider these applications on a case-by-case basis to be sure that the services are consistent with, you know, the village feel.
That actually makes sense, and keeping in mind that these areas are surrounded by residential land.
And becoming more so, you know, as we've seen with the development that has been happening in that area.
And I'll have an alternate point of view, of course. But we need more services on the island, and we've tried to focus everything into the cove for right or wrong. And general services is like, let's make it so that it's more easy for people to set up general services. And we have so many zones within zones within zones that I think that we need to stop that and make it easier for people to understand where we're trying to go with things.
Yeah, and I myself am not happy about having so many zones and subzones, and it just gets a bit confusing after a while. And
we want to encourage people to work on the island and offer services and make
really,
it better for us.
One parcel though, that there's this land and then that other parcel across from the museum that would be appropriate, that would give rise to that increased activity, commercial activity. I guess the problem is I think we're a little concerned that council's concerned, but we don't know what that concern is, because I'm not sure we can identify anything ourselves. And Steph is pleading the fifth here, I think.
What's that?
You're taking the fifth here. You're not going to tell us.
Nope, I am prepared for
Section 7.
this time. I'm ready.
The Evidence Act.
I wouldn't mind throwing in, like, that wasn't really that particular concern. I wouldn't say it was a consensus of council. Is one specific councilor brought that up, and
Okay,
so
well,
just worth noting. Like, and that was about the only comment I heard, was just the fear of or the worry about what it could open up.
Why don't we be grown-ups then and say what we think? And Richard.
I'm just wondering if there's any impact on the value of the land by changing the zoning to include city services, not just where the insurance business is currently, but if all of those residential homes along Miller Road had their zoning changed to VC1, is there a financial impact, positive or negative?
I think it's hard to tell, but generally commercial property is worth more because it can be income producing. But then you've got to find the businesses to occupy the premises. But I don't think there's any taste for changing that residential zoning to a more commercial zone. Not right now. But that's what happens as cities grow, right? And maybe it's not a good thing, but inner city housing becomes business and warehouse and whatever. So
could we maybe quickly just go back, if it's not too much trouble, to the affected properties map? I just want a reminder of how much property is affected, because I'm looking on the copy I printed off and I see the VC1 designation printed out on something that isn't colored darkly like the insurance property is and like the library is. So I'm
Do
just,
you want to do that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'd be curious to see it again too. I think
Yeah, I'm
I
just
think I do
wondering-
remember, but
yeah,
I think I just was able to see. I think you can see a VC1 versus VCI with a small I is the zone we're dealing
Okay.
with.
it's a bit hard to read on
Yes.
my printed
Share
off
it again?
copy.
Drew, can you pull it up again? Do you have
Oh.
it there?
Sure. Sorry, I'll share my screen. So
Thanks.
I imagine, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but is that the VC1 that you're looking at?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
On
yeah,
my
so-
copy, it looks very much like the blue.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so we're looking at the where the archives museum is. And the
there's
insurance,
that one
yeah,
property the other side of Miller Road.
Is the RCMP.
Is outlier. What is that?
It's the RCMP on one side and the museum and archives on the other.
Museum's on the other side of Miller Road.
okay.
Yeah. Geez, I think I'd know by now.
And that's the insurance company on the right side further up.
Yeah.
And then the fire station,
Mm-hmm.
new fire hall, and the library.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm kind of inclined to agree. I don't really see the issue with allowing general services for all of the BCI.
Okay. Well, why don't we craft a recommendation on that basis? I think, oh, I have to plug my computer in.
Okay, I'm gonna.
There we go.
I've got
So-
something here. It's beautiful. You're gonna love it. I hope I captured that right.
Haven't seen anything yet to know.
Oh.
We go.
Is that big enough?
Okay. Well, I think we are in agreement on the recommendation. Are we in agreement on that little preamble about more services are needed, or do we need to say something further there, or?
You don't have to. That just I captured some concepts that were discussed. We can take them out if you'd like.
I would just add the word local in front of services.
And maybe are needed is a little too pedestrian.
Desirable.
And should we say more local general services?
Sure.
Just to be clear that, we're referring to what we see in this definition. We're not suggesting that a auto repair shop should be down in the cove necessarily.
They do make mention of a need for a shoe repair service, though.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Is it
I
in a
think,
commercial district or near a commercial district? Is that
I think you have to. I don't think you need the first whereas,
okay?
but I would change the next sentence to say local general services, and then we've got the general services as in the proposed bylaw.
Yeah.
And
then
then,
just-
sorry, Steph, go for it, Drew.
Okay. I think Daniel was about to say the same thing. I assume just that very last sentence. That I think we want to say, want the VCI zone to be amended to allow a general services zone.
Mhm.
Not if we
Thank
say
you. I
fully
know.
rezoned,
I
it
know.
sounds
I'm like one of the planners. Tell me what actually is. Sorry, can you say it again?
Yeah. So recommend that the village civic zone be amended to allow general services use.
Is it one?
Yes.
Village Civic so-
Yeah, correct. Sorry, that's what I was confused on earlier.
Be amended to allow, sorry,
General service to allow general services.
use.
That's right.
But I want to get this in there somewhere.
Can it be
so-
that the APC support RZ 2023-0255 and recommend?
Sure.
Yeah, I think, individual cases vary, but I really don't like the idea of a rezoning just for a single property,
Mm.
unless it's like a nuclear waste dump or something.
So I don't need the here, do I? Because it's a name of a zone. Area has more local channels than their own bond. I just thought this is because it feels like a concept rather than an uncountable number of services. If everyone's okay with that verb conjugation.
No, it should be R, shouldn't it?
Okay.
Services is plural.
Feels odd.
Like the coding on the map is VCI,
Lowercase I.
lowercase I. So
I see.
I'd like to use that so that we're very clear that we're only applying it to those, like what we saw colored blue on the map.
Mm-hmm. Like that?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Get rid of this embarrassment.
Okay. So I think we're ready for a mover.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Richard. And a second.
I'll second.
Kirsty, all in favor?
Yay.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thanks, Steph, for your wording there. And do we still? Oh, okay. I lost my agenda, but I'm guessing there's some information items and then an adjournment. Am I right there?
You're right. You've done this before.
Does anyone have any further comments before I seek a motion to adjourn?
I'll just add, it's not there under information items, but I'm just gonna say, there was an announcement from the municipality and the CMHC that we were successful in a grant application for something called the Housing Accelerator Fund.
$1.6 million?
Yeah, is the headline item. So there's a number of initiatives that we've undertaken or like pledged to undertake as part of the grant. And so one of them is essentially reviewing parking standards for affordable housing projects. And that's one that I had pegged that we could be bringing to the APC for your thoughts and input on. So we don't have a next meeting scheduled, but it might be next meeting or it might be,
Did you
a couple more after that. But at some point, that'd be a
parking?
future project we'd be bringing to the APC. Yeah, it's looking at parking standards for affordable housing projects.
Ah.
So just coming attractions.
I look forward
Good
to
to
that.
know.
Okay, any further, and thanks for that. I think that's like you said, was the headline, and I think I'm hoping that's just the beginning of the acknowledgement that smaller municipalities do need the financial assistance of senior levels of government.
Mm-hmm.
And Drew, thank you for your maiden run went very well, I think. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you guys
for
were
that.
great. Great discussion.
And okay. The one thing I know about a motion to adjourn is it doesn't require a seconder and there's no debate. So
Yeah.
you can't
Okay.
move it, Steph. I'm sorry. Can somebody move that, please?
I will.
Thanks, Kirsty. All in favor?
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night, everyone.
Till next time.
Thank you.
And thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you
Bye.
all.
Mm.